There is a particular kind of guilt and heaviness that follows when we have to end a friendship. And sometimes you can even feel like a social pariah, like there must be something wrong with you. Like, why can't you keep it together? The thing is that at least in a romantic relationship breaking up, there's language for it, there's books for it, there's support groups for it. There is a culture that gives us a script and an identity to follow. Good morning, and welcome back to the Sage Sorority. I'm your host, Shantel, and if you are new here, welcome. This is the Sage Sorority, an online community and weekly podcast. This is a podcast for women who like a little bit more meat on their bones and a little bit more depth to their conversation. Every week we are here peeling back topics like womanhood, sisterhood, identity, dating, self-concept, and all the things we're thinking, but we don't talk about enough. Your only dues are your ears, never your dignity. So welcome and welcome back to my loyal listeners. This week we have part 6 in the Sisterhood Chronicles. For those of you that are new, the Sisterhood Chronicles is a very specific mini-series where we discuss all things female friendship. We go through everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, and we are in part 6 of this amazing series. And today we are touching on Chapter 6, how to end a friendship, and more importantly, how to do it in a very elegant, classy, graceful way, not feel bad about it, not necessarily burn bridges, unless you need to. But before we get into that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you are new and you are listening on YouTube, please subscribe, hit the notification bell so you are always notified of our weekly uploads. If you are listening audio version on Spotify or Apple, please hit subscribe and leave us a cheeky little 5-star review. Okay, that's enough of the intro. You know who I am. You know what we're talking about today. So let's get into today's episode. So even though today we will be discussing how to end a friendship, I'm actually reading a really good book on the state of male friendships and how they keep it together. So this book, I mentioned it before, it's called Who Needs Friends by Andrew McCarthy. And Andrew McCarthy is a well-known actor. He was in a lot of like romance movies in the 80s. He's also a travel writer and a New York Times bestselling author, so slay, we love that. And Who Needs Friends is an unscientific examination of male friendship across America, and it's really cool because his son makes an offhand comment, and that kind of spurs the entire book. And he goes across the country talking to people about his friends, catching up with his old friends. And it's a really interesting book. And I think it really collides like his desire to keep his friendships intact and then also his love of travel, because it's this one long road trip from the East Coast all the way through the South and ending on the West Coast. So really, really, really good book. I've already highlighted a few passages in there. And along the way, he's asking other men, like, what's going on with your friendships? What are the state of your friendship? And I will do a full kind of opinion piece review and deep dive once I finish the book. But I wanted to start with that today because I literally highlighted something on page 3 that I thought was so interesting. So he's at a diner and he's talking to a woman, the server. She's probably 16 or 17 years old. And he tells her what he's doing, driving across America. I've got my notes here with me, trying to figure out male friendship because it seems like a lot of guys just have a hard time with it. And he's like so confused. And she kind of looks at him and puts one hand on her hip and goes like, yeah, no shit. And I thought that exchange was so interesting, even though on face value it seems pretty simple. But these people have about 40 years of life between them, right? She's in her late teens and this guy has to be in his 50s. And it's taken him the majority of his life, the beginning of one long road trip, an offhand comment by his son, for him to even explore that idea that men are actually struggling with their friendships, and this is now something that has been revealed to him. And this girl's like, yeah, I basically knew that when I came out the womb. I think that's so interesting because women are so socialized to feel the weight and the beauty of friendship so early, and it's something that we absorb not only in our regular lives, but through our media, through our books. You know, I was reading about female friendship and girlhood in that kind of sense when I was a kid. And I don't know if boys these days have anything even close. The only thing I can kind of think of is like the Little Rascals, and then on a worse end, like Lord of the Flies. But I fail to think of environments where young boys are together in a positive way, and it speaks to boyhood in a very kind way. And I feel like nowadays those kind of movies don't even really exist. Like even me thinking of like The Little Rascals and stuff like that, like I don't even think movies like that exist anymore that really center young boys. And the part that I don't think gets talked about enough is that awareness, it kind of cuts both ways. So we understand why and how friendship matters, especially with women, which is exactly why ending one feels like the end of the world. We know the stakes, and we've always known the stakes, both internal and external. And we're going to talk about how we get there, what to do with that, and where we go from here in today's episode. So first, we're going to talk about why this is actually just so hard. So for those of you that are loyal listeners, episode 6, the Sisterhood Chronicles, the very first Sisterhood Chronicles, and actually our most popular downloaded episode. So if you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend you do. I said that female friendships can be your safe haven, but can also be a source of confusion, unspoken tension, and of course, deep heartbreak. And if you've lived long enough, you can identify with all of those things. I meant it then, and I mean it even more now. What I didn't fully unpack in that episode, though, is that what happens when you are the one that has to walk away? And there are a million reasons why friendships end and why sometimes friendships have to end. And I do wholeheartedly believe in that idea that people are in your lives for a reason, season, and lifetime. And I really do think that that's true. And unfortunately, fortunately, whatever way you look at it, most people are not going to be in your lives for your entire life. That's just a numbers game, right? And it's the same with dating. Like most boyfriends you have aren't going to be husbands, and most men you meet are not going to turn into boyfriends. It's just kind of that idea of like numbers and probability. But there is a particular kind of guilt and heaviness that follows when we have to end a friendship. And sometimes you can even feel like a social pariah, like there must be something wrong with you. Like, why can't you keep it together? It's in similar vein to when we look at people and we say something derogatory like, she can't keep a man. Like, it's the same idea. And we should know, because that statement is very idiotic, that it's really the same thing. Friendships fail and end and cease to exist anymore for a million reasons. And not all of them are very salacious and are of a personal failing. But the thing is that at least in a romantic relationship breaking up, there's language for it, there's books for it, there's support groups for it. There is a culture that gives us a script and an identity to follow, right? It's like in Sex and the City when Charlotte's like, well, however long you dated, it should take half of that time to get over the person. So she dated a guy for 3 months, and true to form, in 6 weeks, she was over it. So we don't have that with friendship, right? You might never get over it. You maybe shouldn't even be affected by it, which is also insane. We don't have that kind of cultural language with it, which is really unfortunate and needs to change. Not only do we struggle with making friends as we get older, we also struggle with maintaining friendships and then ceasing the friendship. And because of that, things usually blow up very dramatically, or usually over something that was never really an issue and has just kind of quietly built and built and built, or you have a thing where the friendship is kind of just faded away and we've both kind of silently just started to retreat. I think of that meme of Homer Simpson just kind of going into the bushes. Like, it's just like bit by bit, we're just both doing that. Neither of those is particularly graceful, to be honest. And neither of them, I think, make you leave with the most clarity on the high end and maybe dignity on the low end. And this is what I've noticed with myself, and even in conversations with women that I trust, is that before we let a friendship go, we spend a lot of time looping it in our heads. And I think it's similar to relationships. I think everyone knows, and if you don't, let me be the first to tell you, that when a woman ends a relationship or even a marriage, a lot of the healing she's already done, a lot of the processing she's already done, versus I don't think the same is true for men. I think a lot of their processing and healing happens afterwards. But with friendship, we tend to cycle through a mental checklist over and over and over again. Am I being too sensitive? Am I being too rigid? Have I done enough? Am I a good friend? You might subsequently speak to other friends to get their perspective. Like, am I being crazy? Like, do I have high expectations? And I can speak to firsthand experience that, like, that is usually how I process things. I have a borderline maniacal point of view when it comes to checking and balancing myself. Like, I always want to make sure that I'm being fair, that I'm being equitable if the situation calls for it. I think I have a Libra moon, and I think it really shines in that moment. Like, I'm just like, things need to be right. The feeling of wanting things to be just is very strong, especially for me when it comes in friendship. And you know what? Let me not even talk too much, because I'm like, do I have a Libra moon or do I have a Libra rising? I always get them mixed up. I really shouldn't. I should know better than this. I have a Libra moon. I was correct. It's Scorpio rising. My bad, guys. My bad. And what does it say? I'm going to pull up on CoStar because I'm like, am I reaching? Like, does it even actually say that? Okay, so moon in Libra. So the moon rules your emotions, moods, and feelings. T. This is likely the sign you most think of yourself as, since it deeply reflects your personality when you're alone and deeply comfortable. Your moon is in Libra, meaning your emotional self is balanced, harmonious, sees both sides of every situation, indecisive, relationship-oriented, and desperate to please. You can be a little self-obsessed, but tend to hide your feelings and needs. It's in your 11th house, meaning you find security and safety through your friendships, social life, and social status. So some of that I would say is incorrect. I really don't identify myself as a Libra. I know I'm going on a tangent. I don't identify myself as a Libra. I really identify myself as a Capricorn because I've got like 5 planets in Cap, and it's just so me, so T, so me coded. I wouldn't say I'm desperate to please, but I do have some people pleaser tendencies that I have really actively gotten out of in my 30s and have worked to almost eradicate, God willing. I wouldn't say I'm indecisive. That's something I really pride myself on. I'm very good with decision making, and I truly believe that indecision is a decision. But it's something that I've had to get better at with time, and I think that's actually come from confidence more than anything else. I am relationship oriented when it comes to my friends, absolutely. I find safety through friendships, social life, social status, but also money, which is very Cap coded. But I would say I do try and look at both sides of things, but not in an annoying devil's advocate contrarian way. Again, it goes back to me wanting to heavily checks and balance myself. And this goes back to the friendship thing, because I have had to end friendships before, and it took me a long time before I was like, enough's enough. And I'm definitely someone where it's like death by a million paper cuts. And then I was like, you know what? Now it has to stop, because I've been more than fair, and now I know that I'm not being unrealistic or being difficult. I've put in enough, and it just needs to stop now. And I will say all of that to say sometimes that's the right instinct. Oftentimes that's the right instincts. Friendships do go through seasons. People do go through difficult periods where they're not their best selves. You're not always up. It's not always your moment. It's not always your time. It's not always your night. And I do think that's a mature way to look at it. I will say, though, you got to make sure you're in community and people that are mature enough to look at it that way for you. In my experience, not everyone is, and that has nothing to do with age. So don't let age cloud you in that respect. Grace is real, and grace is worth giving. I used to be friends with a girl, and she used to repeat very often, you know, I always want to give someone grace and space. And I thought it was so simple and very mature. And I will say that it is important. It is needed, especially if you want to have friends longer than 5 minutes. Very important, especially in our 30s when our lives are changing in such leaps and bounds in ways that they didn't in our 20s. But there is a version of that loop that is not a sense of maturity and generosity, and it's just a hard, cold stall. And you are convincing yourself that everything is good, everything is Gucci, and you need to stay where you're at for many different reasons. But at the end of the day, the friendship isn't serving you, and you are more interested in, I would say, keeping the peace or letting status quo be it than, you know, causing those ruffles. And the question I want to ask you is simple. If you're in this situation, or if you've ever been in this situation, are you still in that friendship because you believe there is something genuinely worth fighting for? Or is it because you haven't given yourself permission to leave, permission to be done, permission to be upset, permission to say, you know what, I don't want to tolerate this anymore, and even though I'm going to lose a friend, I am okay with gaining my self-respect, my time, my love, my money, whatever. With that said, not all friendship endings are the same. And I think just collapsing them into one category isn't helpful and can feel very heavy. And I think there are several reasons why friendships kind of fall apart, but we'll talk about 3 today. And I will talk about how they require something different of you. So 1 is just your natural drift. For whatever reason, you are going in one direction and she is going in another. 2 people who grew in different directions. And this happens a lot, as Tink says, in the splinter era. So post-college, post-high school, things like that, right? Like, I'm going to this school, you're going to this school, and now we're going to have new friends at this school. There's no bad blood, there's no beef. We're just kind of going in different directions. A natural drift can also be if you guys became friends and got close through work and then one of you leave or both of you leave. That repetition and that rhythm and that proximity isn't there anymore. So there can be a natural drift if the friendship just doesn't have enough of a foundation to continue it on. This, I don't think, always needs a conversation. You absolutely can have one. However, I would add that you should only have one if you don't want the drift to continue and if you are prepared to do more than you've been doing in the past. But calling out a drift just to call out a drift is not helpful. It can put someone in a defensive position and it doesn't really solve anything. So that's my only asterisk to that. I think what you can do if you're okay with the drift, or maybe you're just too busy to even focus on that right now, is just accept it for what it is. Byron Katie, she's a thought leader, and I've mentioned her on the pod before. She has like a thought process, a theory, a methodology that a lot of our suffering comes from resisting what is and accept things as if you chose them. I know that it's also like Eastern theories as well. That's very highly linked to Buddhism. But it's just kind of this thing of like, if your friendship has drifted in a natural way, maybe that's for the best and accept it for what it is. So with friendships that have had that natural drift, if you're okay with that or you have accepted it because, go back to my first point, you're not really in a position to change things, or you have made that effort and the person isn't receiving it, or the person isn't meeting you halfway, then the most honest thing you can do is just let it be a warm, loving, occasional check-in, maybe an Instagram kind of relationship, and let it be that and accept that for where it is at this moment in time and space. It's not an indication that this is where you guys will be forever, but it is an indication of where things are right now. Releasing that obligation to keep something at the same level and the same pace that it once was just puts both of you in a weird space. And I think accepting your relationship for where it is right now gives you both a lot more clarity. I hope I don't sound like monotone. Guys, allergies, hay fever, as the Brits call it, has truly been kicking my ass lately. It's absolutely insane. I don't know when this is going to be over. Today is a high pollen day and it's just crazy. Like, it's absolutely crazy. I just kind of want my sinuses back, you know what I mean? So if I sound like very stuffy, I don't have a cold. It's just allergies have literally been kicking my ass. Okay, anyways. The second is a friendship that has had some sort of incident, some sort of catalyst, some sort of situation that has kicked off this potential dissolving. Now, I will say that I've experienced the first example, the natural drift. I've also experienced this example. And, a blind man can see which one is more dramatic. It's not great when there's an incident that has caused you to have your friendship in question. And I've been there. I have been there so recently as maybe 2 years ago. Yeah, I think, 2 years ago to the month. So I've been there. I also had a situation where an incident didn't end the friendship, but it kind of changed my perspective on the friendships. And I'm sure most women listening have been there. It could be a breach of trust, a moment that changed things. It could be a vacation fallout. I've also been there. Something that was said or done, something that wasn't said, something that wasn't done, that you just haven't been able to move past, right? It's been too egregious for you to move past. Everyone gets to decide what is egregious based on your written and unwritten rules of the friendship. What might be egregious to you, egregious meaning like absolutely not going to stand for that, might be okay for you, might not be okay for me, vice versa. This one usually does need a conversation, not necessarily to repair it, but to close it properly. And I will say, this is where things get sticky because I often find that in these situations, there's often not a conversation. And there's not a conversation because many reasons, but we're not socialized on how to deal with conflict in our relationships. And that I would say is across the board. Men are not socialized very well with it, neither are women. We're barely socialized with it in our dating relationships, and that's like the only language we really have for it. We don't have it in our friendships. So it's kind of just like you deal with things until they bubble over, and we've seen that time and time and again. Sex and the City is a really good example of that. In episode 6, I mentioned the quote, "Speak from the scar, not from the wound," and that is so important because I think a huge reason why we don't have these conversations and we don't close things cleanly is because we're not able to speak from the scar. We're speaking from the wound. It's happened in real time, or there hasn't been enough of a calm down for us to have a legitimate conversation. Or things are bubbling over and you finally have that conversation and you guys are popping off at each other. If you want to have a conversation with a friend, you have to be past that painful pain. You know what I mean? You have to be out of that reactive space. You have to be ready to speak clearly and confidently, and not from a place of no emotion, because I think that's silly, but from a place of like low emotion where you can really speak on how you genuinely feel and what you genuinely think, both now and maybe when XYZ happened, but also to listen. You have to be able to listen and be able to receive. The issue that I think we get into is because how long can you wait between that moment, that incident, what was said, what wasn't said, what was done, what wasn't done, and a peaceful place to speak about it calmly, rationally, like adults? I'll be completely honest. Sometimes that gap is very wide for me. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it has been. And that's all well and good, but what the hell do you do in the middle? You know what I mean? Do you avoid this person? Do you speak to them as if things are normal, but then wait until you're calm? Then that's not fair because that can send someone for a loop like, so all this time I thought we were good when we weren't. And that's really hard because when you have that conversation, you want to be as fair as possible and you want it to be as productive as possible. If you have brought yourself to a place where you can confidently have the conversation, you want it to be as beneficial as possible. And when you're speaking from the wound, when you're speaking from that bruise, when you're speaking from that tender place, the chances of things going left is very, very high. And then third is the friendship has run its course. This one I feel like can sometimes be a natural drift, but sometimes not. Sometimes it's a little bit more clear. Like maybe you guys were thick as thieves for a part of time in your life, and now like that time is over. I feel like a really good example of friendships that have run its course is like party friends. Like if you had like a party bestie, like, and that's what you guys did for 3 years, in and out, and then you get into a relationship or you decide to settle down and have a family or you get sober, and it's like that person is not bad and you are not good, and vice versa. It's just that the friendship has run its course because that basis of which you connected, like, doesn't really exist anymore. I think that sometimes this can be misunderstood because there's no villain. Like, there's no one wrong in this equation. You still love this person, you wish them well, and again, vice versa, but the friendship has no foundation for where you're going. And it can be hard to justify to yourself or even explain to others because on paper, nothing is wrong. It's just more of a feeling. And if you have that feeling, I definitely think you should trust it. I think for me, if I'm speaking about myself, because you guys know, friendship is like such a big part of my life and it's something that I care so deeply about. And I've actually always been this way. I think for me, I had a lot of new friends post-COVID. So most people would expect that I had a lot of new friends when I moved to London, but it actually took me quite some time to really find my footing in London from a friendship point of view. And I really didn't start, I moved to London I moved to London end of 2018. So in October, I didn't meet like my first new friend like on my own until 2019 spring. And it took me, I would say 2021 is when I started to meet like a bunch of new women. So that's 2018. In between that, I knew people and I had one good friend, but I didn't really start to meet like more women until 2021. And I can say that a lot of those women that I met at that time were not close anymore. We're not friends anymore. And it's truly because the friendship had ran its course. Like we were friends for a moment in time. And although it wasn't clearly stated that we are friends only for this moment in time, it just kind of ended up being like that. I think we were all in the city. We were all in our early 30s. We were all single. We were all dating. Like we were all on the same wavelength. Really different women, different life experiences, different careers, different industries, different childhood traumas, all that stuff. But we were really all on the same kind of time. Single, in our 30s, dating, and soaking up everything that post-COVID London had to offer. Splinter eras can come at any time, and sometimes your group kind of falls apart because this person has a baby, this person's now moving to Manchester, you and this person aren't really kicking off anymore, now the group is kind of fractured. So all of these things kind of happened, and I'm not really close with any of those women that I was close with back then. Totally fine and totally normal, in my opinion. The whole point of this is about when those things happen, how do you cease it in a clear, calm, graceful, and respectful way? And I want to lead with graceful doesn't mean painless. Like, that's not necessarily what that means. It can, but granted, if you cared enough and you care enough to have some sort of an exit, then there's going to be feelings involved. And it's not necessarily one where no one gets hurt. Everyone just has their dignity intact, and I would say like clarity. And I think this is what it can look like ideally in practice. It starts with being first and foremost honest with yourself. Like you have to know what it is that you want out of your friendships, or on a smaller scale, what is it that you want or don't want out of this particular friendship. Before you say anything to anyone, and I do err on the side of caution going to other friends to discuss this, especially if you guys are in the same group, it gets very messy unnecessarily, and I need you to put your big girl pants on, and I need you to think about things for yourself, first and foremost. Not necessarily the one incident or the list of grievances, the actual reason that this friendship no longer serves where you're at right now and or serves where you're trying to go, or reflects who you are and or reflects who you are becoming. Insert whatever makes sense for you, but those are really the general underbellies of a friendship no longer working. You don't necessarily need a case file, but at the same time, I'm not advocating for you to just drop people on a whim because you feel like it. You cannot be in community with people and you cannot have relationships if grace and space is something that you are unwilling to give at any time. You will always be alone. I don't know if anyone's told you that, but that is the truth. Argue with your mom. Don't give that man more chances than you give your friends. Maybe that's a different pod for another day, but I want to add these disclaimers because I think people get a little hard-headed sometimes, and I want to make sure that I say that very plainly and very clearly. From there, you need to figure out if the friendship is worth some sort of gradual release or a conversation needs to be had. And I think a conversation needs to be had when there was something of serious grievance, because you can have like an incident, but you guys were never that close to begin with. So you're like, okay, I'm off this and that's it. Like, I think there's room for that. And sometimes the natural drift is more than okay. Now, the natural drift might happen and then that person comes back to you and says, hey, what happened? At that point, you can be like, okay, cool. For the act of grace and clarity, I will tell you what happened, which kicked off the natural drift. I hope that I'm making sense. I think long friendships deserve a conversation. I think deep friendships, and that doesn't necessarily mean length, deserve a conversation. I think friendships where the other person is going to be blindsided, like, you know, your friends, and we know that not everyone is tapped in all the time. If you feel like your friend is genuinely going to be like, I had no flipping clue, conversation is needed. Conversation is also the respectful choice. And if you were on the other side of this, you would want the conversation. Please remember that. Even if it's uncomfortable, no one likes to be ghosted. So let's not ghost our friends. For friendships that have already been fading or where the dynamic has been very one-sided, I've also been on that before. Like, do we need to have a conversation? No, I don't think so. I just think becoming less available, not manufacturing reasons and excuses and closeness also, like, miss me with the pretending to be close to these people that you're not. I need everyone to stop that. And that is a social media thing. And again, conversation for another day, but I need you guys to stop getting on the internet and acting like these people are your besties and they're not. Because if they're your besties, why aren't you friends with them in 6 months? Right, because they were never your besties. So please, let's just all respect ourselves and stop doing that. I never did that, but please, it's just not necessary. Like, it's okay. We know that you're cool. We know that you have friends. Like, you don't have to manufacture friendships for the internet for us. Like, it's okay. It's all right. Trust me. I promise you. I've been on the internet a long time. It's okay. Anyways, I'm going on a rant. I think like the closure and the peace of mind on both sides is more than fine. I don't think it needs necessarily a conversation. It can also catch the other person off guard because you're adding more fuel to the fire rather than like watering it down. So I think you'll know when it's like, I'm just going to take a step back. I can tell you're taking a step back and we're both kind of taking a step back together. No beef, no issue. You know, we're both on the same time. But what I want to push back on is the idea that you don't owe anyone an explanation. This individualism, this rah girl boss that we get from the internet, that's just fundamentally not true. We do owe each other things. Like, sorry, contrary to popular belief, unpopular opinion, we actually do owe each other things. And the deeper you're in community with someone, the more you owe them. Just like you owe a friend, if you're running late, to tell them that you're running late and to apologize for running late. And I speak to this as someone who's often late. You owe your friend an explanation if you've been on BS. Like, yeah, you do. Just like you owe a stranger to hold the door if you see them coming behind you. And just like that stranger owes you a thank you. Don't even get me started on the fact that in London, a lot of these people do not say thank you and they don't say you're welcome. I could do a whole TED talk on this. Like, catch me at Covent Garden. Is it Covent Garden where they have like Speaker's Corner? Oh my gosh, guys. I need to just get on there and be like, everyone needs to start saying you're welcome, and I'm sick of it. The Canadian in me is sick of it. Anyways, because you do actually owe people in your life the truth while still being kind, while still being loving, while still being gentle, even in some cases. Like, yeah, you do owe that. Again, give your girlfriend half as many chances as you give that guy, right? Like, come on. But you don't have to then talk yourself back into something that you know is not fit for you. That's where I would draw the line. Honesty, clarity, fairness, gentleness, lovingness. It's not about just speaking your truth. It's about speaking your truth kindly, because there's a real person on the other end of that. You don't just get to go rogue and be like, well, I just spoke my truth. And as someone who has been on the end of a woman just speaking her truth when actually she was just kind of being a jerk and it was very painful, I don't advise that. And it just doesn't bode well for you. You're not eating like you think you are. Trust me, you're not. And like I said, you don't have to walk yourself back into a situation that is not for you just because the other person doesn't want it to end. Does that make sense? I hope so. So I know that this episode may seem like there's more questions than answers, and that's kind of intentional because I kind of want to lead you to the water depending on what's going on in your life right now with your friendships, and if this is even relevant to you now, or it might have been relevant to you in the past. So obviously, this is part 6 of the Sisterhood Chronicles, and I'm going to try and do a little prescription and through line so you guys know, because this is where I pull what we've built from the Sisterhood Chronicles, and you're able to kind of like connect the dots in the through line. So in episode 25, the friendship audit, I asked you to identify who in your life was draining versus who is nourishing, right? If you did that honestly, and if you need to go back and giving you all the resources, babe, go back. You probably already knew then what friendships were on borrowed time. Like it's very clear. You check in with your intuition, you check in with your brain, and bada boom, bada bing, you have an answer. In episode 44, we talked about friendship fatigue, right? The exhaustion of showing up, doing the things, being the type A, this conversation about I'm just type B, like type B's got to pull their weight in their own way, right? For friendships and people that are just not meeting you halfway. And then today, part 6, which will be episode 59, is the natural next step. So once you've identified it, you've sat with the fatigue, or you've sat with the fatigue and then you've identified it, what do you do now? And my prescription will say is to give yourself permission to do what needs to be done without it being dramatic. Grieve your friendship that might be over, right? It is a real loss and it deserves acknowledgement. I can tell you guys honestly and very vulnerable that I had a very big friendship breakup in 2013. Am I making that up? No, I think that's wrong. 2016? Hold on. I'll tell you guys. Because then I went to Miami. It was like 2 weeks before my birthday. Yeah, it fucking sucked. It was like 2 weeks before my birthday, and then I went to Miami for my birthday. And I remember like being on South Beach eating pasta and like nearly crying in my pasta. Yeah, it was really bad. What a time. Okay, but then that birthday was like still really good. It was really weird. We ended up going to Diddy's party like on Star Island at his mansion. Like what a time, what a time, what a time. I think that was 2013, you know. Hold on, I'm gonna go because I like cannot remember things often, so I have to go to Google Photos, and that's how I remember things, because I would never remember otherwise. Okay, let me see. Yeah, January 1st, 2014. I'm looking at a picture of me and this girl in the club. She was so funny and cool, and I think she was Canadian too, and we just like really hit it off, and God, wherever she is, I hope she's well. Her pillows are cold and she's being taken care of. But yeah, this is literally like me on my birthday. Oh, God, what a time. I had that outfit made and oh my God, what a mess. Anyways, so not the point, Shantel, wrap it up. What was I saying? Yeah, it is a real loss. So don't feel bad that you feel bad, basically is what I want to say. And I'm telling you guys that because I genuinely lived it, because at the time, we're talking about, this is 2013, now getting into 2014, there was no language, no podcasts, no articles, no Substack, no TikTok videos to tell me like, hey, sometimes friends split and it can be a really shitty thing and it doesn't make you a shitty person and it's a real loss and this is kind of how you navigate it. It was so tough and I'm so grateful because I had a friend at the time who had gone through something similar so we could kind of bond in that way, but I felt so alone because most people I knew had never gone through anything like that. Like they couldn't relate. And I think they also couldn't relate because I didn't have like one catalyst incident, right? Like this wasn't like you slept with my boyfriend type of thing. Like those I think people can really rationalize and get their head around, but I didn't have that, you know. It was on her end, death by a million paper cuts. And I also think her insecurities were coming into play. I can probably do a podcast on this. It would probably be like a Substack behind the paywall because it's a little bit more personal, but I didn't have that. And I'm so grateful for my friend who kind of held space for me because we were kind of navigating how we felt in real time, although her situation was slightly different. It was a real loss and it was very painful. It changed the way I looked at friendship and it changed the way I showed up in friendships because I think for a long time, my pendulum went the other way and I panicked about not being a great friend and I panicked about not doing everything to the utmost capable 10x because I didn't want to get cut out again. I didn't want to have that feeling of being left behind again. And obviously, because that's not the way the world works, that also came to bite me in my ass, like subsequently, like maybe like 2 years later. So I say all that to say, feel the feels and don't suppress them, because it's a real relationship, it's a real severing, and it's a real loss. Have the conversation if it's warranted, again, situational and or friendship warranted, from a grounded place. Speak from the scar, not from the wound. I can't express this enough because it sets the tone for how the post-friendship will be. And again, life is short, but it's also very long. And that doesn't mean that you guys are never going to be friends again. It doesn't mean that your lives are not going to cross again. And I just think if you clean your side of the street and you do things in the most respectful way possible, you leave the door open, maybe for friendship, but at the bare minimum, just for cordialness, just for non-awkwardness, just for peace and grace. Then let it go. Like, let it go, let yourself move forward, let your shoulders drop, release the weight of what you've been carrying. You're allowed to outgrow things. Unfortunately, you are allowed to outgrow people, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. And it's not a character flaw, and others are allowed to outgrow you. Not everyone and everything is a match forever and ever and ever, amen. Like, sometimes things really do come to a point where the relationship has to change, has to adjust, or has to separate completely. If you are navigating this, I am giving you lots of hugs and big love, because I know it's tough. It's tough no matter which way you slice it. But if you operate with empathy, with kindness, and with grace, you will always come out on top. The most important thing is that you're 50% in this situation. You navigate that well and you do it to the best of your ability. You can't control how someone else is going to react and how someone else is going to feel and what someone else is going to say, but you can do your damnedest to make sure that you are showing up in the best way possible. So that's today's episode. I know, kind of a heavy one, but I hope that it's helpful and I hope that it resonates with someone out there. Reach out and touch a neighbor. If you grew up in church, you know what that's about. And I would love to hear from you guys. Like, have you ever had to end a friendship? Have you ever had someone end a friendship with you, either directly or indirectly? Did you handle it badly? Did you handle it well? DM me on Instagram at the Sage Sorority or at Shantel Russo. I'm always on there. You can follow us also on TikTok at the Sage Sorority, at Shantel Russo as well. Subscribe to our Substack. All these links are in the show notes. I've been throwing up regular essays. Definitely read my thoughts and perspectives. I spent 24 hours in Miami, my favorite big girl city, and I wrote about my time and my feelings being there after not being there in several years. So definitely go and check that article out. Again, all the links are in the show notes. If this episode resonated and you liked it at all, the best absolute thing you can do is share it with a friend. Share it on your stories, share it to a friend in DMs or on WhatsApp and be like, hey girl, I think you'd really like this. That is the best way to show some love to the show. I mentioned before that podcasts don't really have like their own algorithms. Podcasts really grow through shares. So share it with a friend, review, leave a comment if you're on Spotify, and show us some love. It genuinely helps more people find the Sage Sorority and helps the show grow, which is what we are trying to do over here. I will see you guys, of course, same place, same time next Thursday. Have an amazing week. Have an amazing weekend. Take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.